Let us imagine that a law has been created by the legislature regarding the breaking of signals. The law says that those who break signals will be punished. So now the executive, who is responsible for enforcing the laws made by the legislature, implements this law. So the ministers set up people to set up traffic signals all across the area. And they also set up traffic police at certain intervals. Now every time a person is breaking a signal, he is being caught by the police and being fined. But there's this one person who's refusing to pay a fine to the police because he says that it was not his fault, but the traffic sign was faulty. Maybe the red light was not still, but it was blinking. So in this situation, we see that a dispute has arisen between the police officer and this individual. So what is to be done? If we were living in a society where there were no rules and regulations, probably the person who has more physical strength would have fought and won. But we live in a civil society. So whenever there's a dispute, we have to resolve the dispute in a civil or decent manner. So in this situation, what is to be done next? Let us see. We know that in India, there are 3 organs of the government. So the first is the legislature or the lawmaker. This body makes laws. The second body is the executive. It enforces the law that are made by the legislature. And the third body is the judiciary. So in these situations, wherever there is a dispute, this body, that is the judiciary, comes into view. In our constitution, there are many laws that are written. But what happens if someone doesn't follow these laws? Or who makes sure that everyone is following these laws? That is the judiciary. So the judiciary makes sure that the laws of the constitution are properly interpreted and applies these laws in settling disputes. So the disputes are settled by this body known as the judiciary, which is the third organ of the government. Now, as we've already seen that the judiciary is important in resolving disputes or solving the disputes that occur. Let us talk about the importance of the judiciary. So the first point is dispute resolution. The second importance of the judiciary is that it upholds the law and enforces the fundamental rights. And the third importance is that of judicial review. Let us see each of these points individually. So as we've seen that the first importance is that of dispute resolution. In a society, disputes are bound to arise. Disputes can arise between different sets of people. So at first, it can arise between individuals. For example, if the cars of 2 people have crashed and none of these 2 people are agreeing to an amicable solution, they're blaming each other. So in that case, we see that a dispute has arisen between 2 individuals. Or if one person has a watch, but another person claims that that watch has been stolen from him. So we see that disputes can arise between individuals. Disputes can also arise between individuals and the governments. So as we saw in the last example, the policeman was representing the executive branch. So the executive branch is the government of that state or the country. And the problem was between an individual and the policeman. So disputes can arise also between individuals and governments. Other than this, there may be a dispute between state governments. For example, there is a river that flows through 2 states. Now one of the states wants to build a dam. But the other state does not agree to this decision of the other state because it feels that if a dam is created, then the water supply in their area will reduce, or there will be an occurrence of natural disasters like floods or droughts. So in that case, we see that there is a huge dispute between 2 state governments. So there is dispute between state governments. There also might be a dispute between the central government and the state governments. For example, if the center makes a law on a matter that is under the state list, or it passes a law which affects the constitutional rights of the state. So in that case, we see that a dispute has arisen between the central government and the state government. So the judiciary helps in dispute resolution. Now we've seen that in a society, the legislature is making the laws and the executive is implementing the laws. But that alone is not sufficient for the society to thrive and develop. In every society, certain disputes are bound to arise. Disputes can arise between different people, different groups of people, or between the people and the government, or between different governments. So there has to be an independent body which will not be connected to either of the other two bodies, that is the legislature or the executive, and will be able to carry out justice and resolve the disputes. So the judiciary is that body. So the judiciary is kept independent of the control of the executive and the legislature. Why is that so? It's because, as we've seen, that sometimes disputes can arise between the individual and the executive, or between state governments or the central and state government. So in that case, if the executive has certain influence on the judiciary, then the judiciary will not be an impartial body. It will have bias in favor of the executive. So that is why it is kept independent of the legislature and the executive. So the independence of the judiciary is essential for the functioning of a democratic constitution. So in India, as we know, we have a democratic constitution, and the impartiality of the judiciary is essential for it. The second importance of the judiciary is for upholding the laws and enforcing the fundamental rights. Now we know that the Constitution has given us certain fundamental or basic rights, such as the right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, and these other rights. So the fundamental rights need to be protected as well. So whenever our fundamental rights are violated, then the Constitution gives the judiciary the power to protect those rights. So a person can go to the highest court of the country, that is the Supreme Court, or the highest court of the states, that is the High Courts, if their fundamental rights are being violated. To know more about how the judiciary protects our fundamental rights, you can click on the link for the iDictionary feature. The other reason why the judiciary is important, or a very important power of the judiciary, is the power of judicial review. So, do you know that the judiciary is also known as the watchdog of democracy? Why? Because it has to watch or take care of the democracy. The judiciary has to make sure that everything in the country is going according to the provisions of the Constitution. The power of judicial review is with the Supreme Court and the High Courts. The judiciary has to make sure that the laws that are passed by the legislature or the orders that are given by the executive do not violate the basic structure of the Constitution or go against the democracy. So, the power of judicial review is the power of the Supreme Court and the High Courts to examine the laws passed by the legislature and the orders issued by the executive to check if they are permitted by the Constitution. This is done to see that the government does not get a chance to become dictatorial. Now, what happens if certain laws or certain orders go against the basic structure of the Constitution? In that case, if the court believes that certain laws violate the basic principles of the Constitution and go against our democracy, the court has the power to strike down such laws. So the Supreme Court and the High Courts can declare these laws or actions to be null and void, which means that they will not be followed from now on. So the power of judicial review gives the Supreme Court and the High Courts the power to declare a law or an action to be unconstitutional. Let us understand the power of judicial review better with an example. So in 1983, the Supreme Court struck down the section 303 of the IPC or the Indian Penal Code. So what did this section say? Section 303 of the IPC said that whoever being under the sentence of imprisonment for life commits murder shall be punished with death. So if one person who has been given a punishment for imprisonment for life commits a murder while he was serving, then he will be given the death sentence. So it made death sentence in this case mandatory. Why then did the Supreme Court strike this down? The Supreme Court said that the section 303 of the IPC went against Article 14, that is right to equality, and Article 21, that is right to life of the Indian Constitution. Right to equality because all citizens were not being placed in the same platform in this. And right to life because death sentence was involved. Other than this, it was also contradicting with certain sections of the CRPC. The CRPC is the Code of Criminal Procedure. So the Supreme Court said that it went against section 354 clause 3 of the CRPC. What does this say? It says that when a conviction has been made for an offense which is punishable by death sentence, life imprisonment or imprisonment for any number of years, then the judgment has to give the reasons for the awarding of this sentence. And if it is a death sentence, then special reasons for awarding the death sentence also has to be given with it. It went against this section because in this section 303, there was no chance of a judgment giving reasons. Death was made mandatory. The Supreme Court said that it also went against section 235 clause 2 of the CRPC. What does this clause say? It says that the judge has to hear the accused who has been convicted of an offense before the sentence is passed. And why did 303 of the IPC go against it? Because since in this section death was made mandatory, so it took away from the accused the right to be heard. So since section 303 of the IPC went against all of these provisions of the Constitution, the Supreme Court declared that it was unconstitutional and thus null and void. And it striked down this law. So that is the power of judicial review. Now that we've talked about why the judiciary is important, let us talk about the structure of the judiciary. In India, we have a single integrated judicial system. Seems a little difficult, doesn't it? So let us break it down into small terms and understand its meaning. So the first word that comes here is single. Single obviously means one. So it means that a single set of laws are followed all across the country. So the whole country follows common civil and criminal laws. The laws are not different for every state. For example, Maharashtra and West Bengal will be ruled under the same laws, and same punishment for the same offense will be given in these two places. You'll be surprised to know that that is not the case in certain other countries. For example, in USA, there is no single judicial system. So each state in USA has its own judicial system. For example, in Florida, the minimum punishment for homicide is 15 years. But in New Jersey, it is 30 years. But that's not the case in India. In India, the punishment for homicide is same across all of its state. So, no separate laws based on region, religion or caste. So, there is equality before the law or the rule of law in India, where all citizens from any region are treated equally. Now let's come to integrated. Integrated means unifying or unity, where different components are brought in together. Can you say if the government of India is government in India? Can you say if the government in India is integrated or not? It is not. In India, we have a federal form of government. So there is a different national government and there are state governments in the states. But that is not the case in the Indian judicial system. The judicial system in India is an integrated one. All the courts of India interpret and enforce the same set of laws. These laws that have been made by the state legislatures as well as the union parliament. In an integrated system, there is also a hierarchy of courts. It means that the courts are arranged in order of power. So, courts from the apex level to the lowest level are integrated in a hierarchical pattern. If we go from the maximum powers to the least powers, we will see that in India we have the apex court, which is the Supreme Court. Below that we have the state high courts, and below that there are other lower courts. In India we have a three-tier judicial system where we have the Supreme Court, High Court and the lower or subordinate courts. In this integrated setup, the decisions of the highest court are binding on all the lower courts. So in this integrated setup, the decision of the higher court is binding on all the lower or subordinate courts. So in India, the Supreme Court is at the topmost level or is the apex court. It is not only the head of the judiciary, but it also exercises certain control on the working and the functioning of the other courts that are below it. In such a hierarchical setup, the legal cases initiated at the lower level can be taken up to the higher level. It means that if some case has gone to a lower court and the judgment does not seem to be fair, there is a chance that this case might be taken up to a higher court. This power of a higher court is known as appellate jurisdiction. We'll talk about appellate jurisdiction in a different video. But here what we need to know is that the decision of the Supreme Court is final and binding on the lower courts. Why? Because the Supreme Court is the highest court of the country. So now, can you tell me which is the apex court in India? Is it the Supreme Court, the High Court, the District Court or the Sessions Court? Yes, it is the Supreme Court. Now as we talked about how a case which had been given a judgment in a lower court can be taken to a higher court, we will talk about this case here. Let us see this as an example of the appellate jurisdiction. In February 1980, Lakshman Kumar had married Sudha Goel, and in December of the same year, Sudha Goel died in a hospital due to severe burns. Sudha's family filed a case in the trial court, which is a lower court. For this case, several witnesses were brought in from the neighborhood and they said that this was related to dowry. So the trial court convicted Lakshman, his mother and the brother-in-law, and said that Sudha had been tortured for dowry and then finally killed. So the court gave the verdict, and as punishment, all three of them were given death sentence. When this case went to the High Court, after listening to all of the aspects of the case, said that the fire was caused by the accidental leakage of gas from the kerosene stove. And so the High Court released all three of them. There were a lot of protests by various women organizations in the country after this verdict. They said that justice had not been done. So they filed another appeal in the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court looked into this case as a case of appeal, and on further investigating the case, it found that Lakshman and his mother were guilty. Therefore, its decision was different from that of the High Court. The Supreme Court sentenced Lakshman and his mother to imprisonment for life, but the Supreme Court acquitted the brother-in-law because there was not enough evidence against him. So as we can see that the judgment of the Supreme Court was different from that of the High Court, which was again different from the trial court. So, if a person feels that he has been denied justice by a lower court, he can appeal to the higher court to hear or review his case. Now let us come to the term judicial system. So the judicial system consists of courts and of judges. We place a lot of trust in these courts of law and in the judges, and they have an important position and important role in our day-to-day lives. We trust them as they are impartial, just and fair. We expect them to give justice to us or to resolve our disputes when a dispute has occurred. So that forms the single integrated judicial system of India. The judicial system in India follows the rule of law. What does the rule of law mean? The concept of rule of law is that the state is governed not by the ruler or the nominated representatives of the people, but by the law. So the higher power is that of the law. The law is equal for all the citizens of the society, whether they are normal citizens like us or if they are the nominated representatives of the people. That is, even if they have high positions in the society. So, the rule of law means that the law is impartial and the law doesn't discriminate between people based on caste, sex, gender or religion. You must have seen this picture somewhere. This is Lady Justice. Why do you think Lady Justice has a blindfold? The blindfold signifies that the judicial system is blind to the wealth or gender or sex or caste or religion of the people who come as parties to a dispute. So the judicial system has to be impartial. So we've learned that in India we have a single integrated judiciary with the Supreme Court at the apex and the high courts below that and the lower courts at the bottom of the three-tier system. That makes up the Indian judiciary. We will talk about the powers and the functions of the judiciary in our next video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million+ questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.